just kind of an outline of how, let's say an application goes through the entire cycle. The admissions world is incredibly cyclical, so certain things happen at certain points in the year. Currently, we have our application for fall 2021 for incoming freshmen opening up at the beginning of August. And students can find that application on our website at the Office of Admissions, as well as the Common Application, which is a platform that students can use if they're applying to multiple universities. Makes it really easy to kind of blast off that application to up to 6 universities at once, and save yourself a lot of work on the front end. And currently we have 2 admission deadlines, one in November, so November 1st, as well as January 1st. And our November 1st deadline is called the early action deadline. That just means you're going to get an action on your application earlier. Pretty literal there. You're guaranteed to hear back about your admission decision by the end of January at the latest. And then if you apply by that January 1st deadline, you will receive a decision by March 31st at the latest. Something when guiding students through the admissions process to keep in mind, a little nuance in the terminology, is early action versus early decision. So those are 2 very different things. Early action, like I said, just means that there's going to be an action on your application earlier, whereas early decision actually locks you into attending that university. So you'll see a lot of really selective institutions, a lot of Ivy League schools doing that early decision, and a lot of students get that confused. So some students at the University of Minnesota will say, am I locked in if I'm accepted? The answer is no. You still have until May 1st, which is the confirmation deadline for most universities across the country, to put in your enrollment deposit and say, I'm going to be a Golden Gopher, I'm coming to the University of Minnesota. So students will go through this application process. A lot of our efforts are really focused on just helping students through that application itself throughout the fall and answering questions about it. And I'm sure we're already getting lots of questions. We'll get even more questions about what that application actually looks like this year. And I will say that our office is having some deep conversations right now about how our holistic review process will change with the elimination of the ACT or SAT score, and how, in the future, depending on what is decided, whether we're going to continue requiring test scores in future years or not, how we're really going to adapt and make sure that we are honoring the holistic review process. When we say it's holistic, we want to really, really mean that. So we're looking really closely at our process of, when an application comes in, who is reading it? Are the readers going through implicit bias training? How are committee review decisions being decided? And then ultimately, how is that final decision made? So we really have multiple levels that an application goes through. We have like the first reader, the second reader, sometimes the third and the fourth reader, and then a 5th reader. So you have multiple sets of eyes on each application. And the idea there is, any bias that would go into reading that application would balance out because there are multiple perspectives. And we do have different channels too. If a student has, if say I am working with the student and I get to know them, I visit their high school in the fall and I know their background and their story, there are avenues for me then to go and advocate for that student and say, on the committee review level, here's the student's story and here's why I think they should be admitted to whatever college it is. So there are lots of checks and balances throughout that review process. And then in terms of required materials too, this really ties into obviously what we look at through that review process. We break it up into primary and secondary review factors. So the primary factors are academic in nature. So things like your test scores in the past, that's no longer a thing, as well as your GPA, high school rank, if your high school does that. A lot of high schools in the area are moving away from class rank, but I will say the University of Minnesota, especially from high schools in the area, we've got lots of applicants every year, so we can kind of piece together where a student falls within their high school class just based on our own information. And our policy is really, we are reviewing students within the context of their high school. So this is really relevant for students who are attending a charter school such as Exploration High School too. we really are cognizant of the resources and opportunities available at every student's individual high school, rather than, putting it all in an even playing field. For example, a lot of students from what we call greater Minnesota, more rural areas of the state, don't have access to as many AP classes or, dual enrollment college level courses. We know that, and we're not going to penalize a student if they don't have access to all those opportunities. So if they're the top student in their class in that high school, we'll say, yes, you've proven that you're prepared to be really successful based on what you had available to you at your high school. And then in terms of grading scales as well, I will say we never take a GPA at face value when we're looking at a student's academic record. What I mean by that is, just like number one, you have weighted GPAs, you have unweighted GPAs. Lots of high schools calculate GPA in a different way, like they weight certain classes differently. And then, you have schools like Wayzata High School that's on a 12-point scale instead of a 4-point scale. So it's really like all over the board. And then you've got a lot of high schools in Illinois that are on a 5-point scale for some reason. So whatever it is, we always look into that transcript and say, how did they do in algebra this year, XYZ? Was it an A? Was it a B? How does the high school do this grading? So we're always going to dive into that. We also do our review based on the student's interests that they share in the application. So we're really looking at that too. How much weight do we give to what a student is interested in, and how are we admitting them to something that will line up exactly with their interests? So for example, sometimes we have students who say, I want to be in the College of Science and Engineering. It's one of our more competitive colleges on campus. And students are required to select specific colleges to apply to within the university. But then we have an optional question built into the application that says, what are you passionate about studying, and tell us why? And if they say, I'm really into architecture, then we'll say, looks like College of Science and Engineering is not going to serve your interests. Let's admit you to the College of Design instead. So we'll always look, based on what they're interested in. And then that goes for their coursework as well. So if I have a student who says, they want to be an engineer, I will look most closely at their math and science coursework, definitely, and make sure, they've got chemistry, biology, and physics going in, that they will be successful in their entry-level classes as a first-year engineering student. Whereas if a student wants to be in, let's say, graphic design, I'm hoping to see some art classes or some experiences that would, make sure they have a foundation of understanding before coming into college. And then apart from the primary factors, secondary factors are basically, for me, kind of everything outside of the classroom. So these factors are never going to completely sway the admissions decision, but they're very important nonetheless. So these are things like extracurricular opportunities, job, work experience, extenuating circumstances. There is a place in our application specifically asking, is there any additional information you'd like to share? And that's where I always really advocate for students to share everything. If there has been a decline in your grades during a specific semester of high school due to something that happened in your family or a sickness, whatever it was, we want to know that, so we have that context when we're looking at your transcript. And then also, any other barriers or obstacles that you've overcome that you think are important for us to know. I'm anticipating that we will see a lot of COVID-related responses this fall, and I know that we're possibly working on specific language in our application, prompting students to talk about, what their experience with COVID has been too. Because I'm guessing we're going to see a lot of pass-fail grades, a lot of dropped classes, and we're going to be incredibly flexible with students because we know this was not a normal semester, and it likely will not be a normal semester this fall either. So we'll really meet students where they're at, and if necessary, request additional information from them too if we need more context. And then from there, we look at that application multiple times, like I said, and the admissions decisions will roll out through the winter into the early spring. I will say that our application also automatically puts you in a consideration for the honors program, as well as any competitive merit-based scholarships too. So that's an automatic process just based on the contents of your application. And the review process for those two things, scholarships and honors, mirror our admissions process. So it's also going to be a holistic review. Um, and like, for example, the honors and scholarships are highly competitive. So that will be mostly based on those primary review factors, looking at students, in terms of GPA and coursework within the context of their high school to see how prepared they are. And then from there, like I said, May 1st is the confirmation deadline. Hopefully students will know, where they would like to go by that time. But I will say this past year has been unprecedented, and many students have requested to extend that out into June, and some are still confirming at this point. So we're really meeting students where they are, and we know that there's a lot of uncertainty in the whole world right now. So we're really being flexible with those deadlines, definitely. So that's a little bit about how the process works for a student going through. So we do get portfolio transcripts as well as narrative transcripts. So we have a separate process for that. Normally, we would require a student to fill out, I guess I didn't mention this in my response before. We would require a student to fill out a self-reported academic record, which is basically them just having their unofficial transcript in front of them and entering in each course and grade that they've received throughout high school. Obviously, the self-reported academic record is not going to fit what that portfolio transcript or that narrative transcript would share with us. So in that case, for your students, I would suggest that they reach out directly to our office, send us an email or give us a call to let us know that you'll be submitting a portfolio or a narrative transcript instead. And we can waive that self-reported academic record requirement, make sure our processing team has that all taken care of on the tech end of things in the application. And then just like a normal transcript, it will be read by all of the readers going through. And they will spend more time on that application than others because it does require a little bit more time to do the reading, see the evidence, see the materials, and make a determination based on that. And I know that our readers are trained in reading those types of transcripts as well. Again, like I said, it's all within the context of the high school. So Exploration High School will be a new high school coming in. So I would say too, like Sam, everyone, as this gets off the ground, make sure to reach out to admissions offices to establish that connection and get students in front of admissions officers, admissions representatives, so they can start building that relationship or with your college advisor, so that admissions officers from schools in the area, especially where a lot of your students will end up going to college, have a working knowledge base of what Exploration High School is all about, what the school profile looks like, and what the learning outcomes are of your students coming through. From just like our high school coursework requirement end of things, we do have a list of like high school courses that we would like to see from every admitted student, just like as a baseline. So for example, 4 years of English class, 4 years of math, 3 years of science and social studies, 2 years of a foreign language, and then a year of some type of visual or performing arts class. So we classify those based on however the school classifies them too. So if your high school is saying like this is a social studies class, then that is a social studies class to us, for example. So just making sure like that is communicated with admissions offices, I think that will, that will diminish the amount of questions that come from admissions offices once students start submitting applications to different colleges. But that should be common practice across the board, reviewing students exactly in the context of the high school that they're coming from. I have seen more charter schools pop up and more kind of non-traditional schools pop up all over the country. I mean, like, I think I read a narrative transcript from a student in, South Carolina this past year. So even students coming from way out of state are coming with these non-traditional forms of transcripts. And it's something that, we're really accustomed to working with because, again, we're meeting students where they're coming from. the maturity and learning how to advocate for yourself. Um, just based on, with my interactions with students coming from different high schools across the country, I'm always very impressed when I see students who are reaching out and, doing the admissions process on their own, or at least they're the ones who are sending the emails, making the phone calls, asking the questions. And I think that goes a long way throughout your entire college experience. So, learning how the world works, learning how to navigate different systems, those are all really important things. And also learning how to think critically. I think, Sam and we talked about this when we had our one-to-one for the first time last year, just that students are taught to test so much, especially in, public education systems, that learning how to memorize and regurgitate information over and over again in different subjects isn't necessarily going to teach you how to, think and function in the world and be a successful working adult in the future. I don't remember half the things I learned in, U.S. history class in high school, or a lot of my classes in high school, to be quite honest. I'm sure that's really common across the board. So more than anything, students just need to know how to advocate for themselves. Because the college experience as well, like it is, it's easy enough to come to college and have a pretty passive experience, go to class, make friends in your dorm, have a good time. But you can get so much more out of that experience if you are active and proactive about it. That means, reaching out to career counselors, who are there to help you, with mock interviews, with, going through the job and internship search process, doing informational interviews with different professionals, really like learning how to harness that power, I think is really important. And then also, joining student groups, learning how to navigate the politics of your own university and the communities surrounding it. Those are all really important things too, because if you think about college, it's kind of like this playground where you get to experiment and learn how change is made. Like in my college experience, I got involved with the Minnesota Student Association, the student government, and one of our small projects was getting a stop sign put in right by one of the residence halls where there was a lot of fast traffic coming through. We had to reach out to the city, facilities management, all these different stakeholders, and learn how that process would actually work. So just speaking from my college experience personally, a lot of my key pieces of learning happened outside of the classroom, to be quite honest. And they did in the classroom too. Like, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed my academic experience, but a lot of the things that students challenge themselves to do, be it research and internship, community service, some form of student government, those are, I think, are some of the most valuable parts of college that you won't get anywhere else. So having students who are prepared to take that on and excited to do that, that's invaluable. Similarly, again, students who can advocate for themselves, who can be proactive. Um, Something at a large, R1 research institution that happens a lot too, like I said, with the passive learning experience, is professors seem unapproachable and like they don't care about students and they're just there to do research, whatever it is. I have a feeling, like, I'm just really assuming this, but I feel like many students who say that have never gone to office hours, and have never like gone to introduce themselves to their professor. And that can be life-changing. For example, I took Dennis Donovan's class my sophomore year, ended up going to his office hours, hanging out with him, meeting Harry Boyd, and then getting involved with this work for the rest of college from that moment on. That was so transformative in the way that I thought about myself as a citizen professional, as a person in this world. So, not being afraid to introduce yourself to people and take the extra step, even if it's not going to translate to your grade in that class, that's really important. And then beyond that, I think, just basic skills of, I would say, time management, managing your resources, knowing how to study. Of course, those are all really important things. Knowing how to write a good paper and organize your thoughts in writing. Those are all really important skills to bring into the classroom, of course. But going back to the politics of the university as well, I think, accessing some of those unique experiences and those memorable things that you're only going to get in the college environment, you know, outside of the classroom. I think knowing how to harness those is really important. So again, like knowing how your university works, like, you know, what are all the different offices on campus, student groups, they all have their certain self-interest, they all have their politics. It's like a microcosm of the larger world. I think it's super fascinating to learn how that works and then take as much as you can from those experiences when you leave the university, and go out into the actual real world. I would say I've never come across a high school that is going to implement the principles of public work into its education. And that is just magic. Like, I think Grace Lee Boggs talked about it. Like, there have been different books I've read that have really talked about, like, what does a real, you know, community-centered educational model look like? And it seems like that is what Exploration High School is trying to do. So I'm really excited to see what comes of it and how students can really have that public achievement experience throughout all 4 years of high school, however long they're going to be at Exploration High School, and how it will be woven into the curriculum itself and not just something on the side. Something that really bugs me, I think, about a lot of high schools and the way, you know, that society is kind of set up, mini society in a high school, is you have volunteering experiences, you have community service, you have student council, things like that. All of those are kind of like separate from your classes and separate from your educational experience, and not required in many cases. And same goes for college too. I personally would love to see a world in which all of those elements are just woven into how we are learning about the world in general through different lenses, through the lens of history, through the lens of math, through the lens of science, you know, really bringing the community into the classroom and the classroom into the community. So I absolutely love that and think that if all students had that, they would not only enjoy their education more, you know, because they have like the freedom to think for themselves, but that they would be more impressive college students in the future. Like, I would imagine that professors at the University of Minnesota are blown away by students who have the capacity to think outside of the box and think outside of being taught to a test, for example. So yeah. Behalf of, you know, University of Minnesota admissions and all admissions counselors in general, I would really like to put in a plug for establishing that relationship, because even though an admissions office at a huge school like the University of Minnesota processes, you know, tens of thousands of applications every year, it can kind of seem like you're just getting churned through this process. There are real humans like me behind the screens reading the applications, and also, you know, face to face with students in high schools every year, both in the fall and the spring. And every admissions counselor I've ever talked to says that that is the most enjoyable part of their job. You know, getting to know high school students, hearing their stories, hearing what they're excited about, what are they good at, what are they looking for in their college experience. Like, that's where the magic is. So from my perspective, um, just, yeah, I would just love to continue with the relationship with Exploration High School in the future, as would, you know, University of Minnesota Duluth and Hamlin University in St. Paul. Like, admissions counselors are in their roles for the right reasons. You know, 99.9% of the time, they're there to help students realize their dreams and make sure that they are equipped to navigate the whole process, because we know that it's overwhelming. We know that it's intimidating. We've all gone through it and felt it. And, you know, there are students who come from many different backgrounds where, you know, they have no parents looking over their shoulders saying, this is how you apply for financial aid, or this is how you write a college essay. And we really want to be there to help guide students through that process. So that's the piece I would leave you with, as an admissions counselor.